I want you to ask yourself something. When was the last time you thought of your life the way a gardener thinks about a garden? Not as a project to be completed, not as a performance to be evaluated, not as a set of goals to be achieved on a timeline that has nothing to do with what you actually need, but as a living, breathing, seasonal thing. Something that grows and rests and occasionally goes to seed. Something that needs tending gently, consistently, and with a great deal of patience. Something that cannot be forced into bloom before it is ready. What if your life was a garden? And what if the way you have been living it, the pace, the presence, the relentless output, was the equivalent of planting in concrete and wondering why nothing was growing? I've been sitting with this question for the past several months, since I was laid off from a career I had given 15 years of my life to. Since I found myself standing in my actual garden one morning, nowhere to be for the first time in as long as I could remember. And then realizing that I had been tending everything in my life except the soil it was all supposed to be growing in. I had been producing, performing, achieving, but I hadn't been tending. And there is a difference. Every gardener knows what an overplanted bed looks like. Too much in too small of a space. Everything competing for the same light, the same water, the same nutrients. Nothing thriving because nothing has room. It looks productive from a distance. It looks full. It looks like a lot is happening. But get closer and you'll see that most of what's there is struggling. A life so full that nothing in it is actually thriving. Commitments and obligations and roles and expectations all crowded into the same finite space. Your time, your energy, your nervous system, with no room left to breathe. The solution in a garden is not to work harder. It is to thin out. To make the difficult decision about what stays and what goes. To trust that fewer things, given proper space, will grow more fully than many things crammed together. The same is true of life. I've been asking myself what needs to be thinned out. What I have been holding on to, not because it's been growing, but because I planted it a long time ago. And leaving it behind would feel like a failure. In a garden, space is what allows each plant to reach its full expression. The room for roots to spread, for light to reach every leaf, for air to move through and prevent the damp, stagnant conditions where disease takes hold. We have been taught to treat space in our lives as a problem. Empty time is wasted time. Rest is laziness. Stillness is something to be earned after being productive, not woven through the day as a necessity. This is where the garden disagrees. Space is how things grow properly, and the willingness to create it, to protect it, to refuse to fill it the moment it appears, is one of the most radical acts of self-tending I am learning to embrace. I've also noticed something special about gardeners. The good ones, the ones with the most beautiful, thriving gardens, are not the ones who work the hardest. They are the ones who know when to stop. They read the light. They understand the season. They know that the garden does not need them in every moment, and that some of the most important work happens when they are not there at all. The worst gardens I've ever seen belong to people who love them too much. who were in them constantly, who couldn't leave them alone long enough for the natural processes to do their quiet work. They overwatered them, overpruned, over-intervened. They loved their gardens in a way that made it impossible for the garden to breathe. Does that sound familiar? Have you been tending your life, your relationships, your career, your responsibilities in a way that leaves no room for anything to just be? Every garden needs good soil. Not the soil you wish you had, not the soil your neighbor has. The real, honest, current condition of your soil, assessed without judgment and amended with whatever it actually is lacking. What is the soil of your life made of right now? That's what I've been asking myself. Is it rich with rest, nourishment, connection, and meaning? Or is it depleted, overworked, under-resourced, stripped of nutrients it needs to sustain what you are trying to grow? That's how I've been feeling. The truth is, you cannot plant a flourishing life in exhausted soil and then blame the seeds. The first work of any recovery, the unglamorous, essential, foundational work is restoration. Rest, nourishment, safety. Enough stillness for your nervous system to begin to believe that the emergency is over. This is not the exciting part. It doesn't look like growth from the outside, but it is the work that makes everything else possible. A gardener who plants without intention ends up with a garden that reflects that. Things growing everywhere, no structure, no considered relationship between what is here and what is needed. A lot of effort producing a lot of chaos. Intentional planting asks different questions. I've been asking a lot of questions lately. What do I actually want to grow here? What conditions do I have, honestly, not aspirationally, to offer? What belongs in this season, and what belongs in the next? What am I planting because I genuinely want it? And what am I planting because I feel like I should? These are not just gardening questions. They are questions everyone who takes burnout seriously and who is looking to reclaim their life asks themselves. What do you actually want your life to grow into? That's what I am searching for now. Not a life I was performing before everything became too tiresome. Not a life that looked prolific from the outside, but a life that will feel like mine, rooted, nourished, genuinely alive and authentic. Now I have to ask myself, what does that life need? And can I plant towards it with the same patience and intentionality I bring to my own backyard garden? I used to think a well-tended life looked like a perfectly kept garden. Everything in its place. Nothing out of control. Productive in every season. Beautiful from every angle. I don't think that anymore. A well-tended life looks like a garden that is genuinely cared for. One where the gardener pays attention, not to how it looks from the outside, but to what it actually needs. Where rest is given as freely as water, where space is protected as deliberately as any prized plant, where the different seasons are moved through rather than avoided, and the things that are finished are composted rather than clung to. It might not look impressive, but it is alive, genuinely, sustainably, quietly alive. And in a world that tried to convince you and I that performance was the same thing as living, that is everything. Your life and mine is a garden, and you get to decide how to tend it from here. not the way you were tending it before, out of obligation, out of fear, out of a deeply ingrained belief that your worth was measured in your output. But slowly, intentionally, with rest built in and space protected, and a willingness to trust the seasons you cannot control. The garden has been waiting for you, and so has the version of yourself that grows when she is finally, gently, properly tended.